Coming up on KCCI 8 News Close Up, a fight over land rights isn't over. The next steps for Republicans who want to override the governor's veto and the roadblocks that remain. Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley is defending President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Grassley's pushback to criticism that the bill is a tax cut for the wealthy. And we're hearing from more Iowa candidates entering the race for U.S. Senate and the House, what their message is to voters and why they're running.
This is Iowa's news leader. This is KCCI 8 News Close Up.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us for KCCI 8 News Close Up. I'm Chief Political Reporter Amanda Brooker. Early last week, Senate Republicans released their version of President Donald Trump's signature agenda item in Congress, what the president calls his, quote, one big beautiful bill. The Senate Finance Committee unveiled changes to the tax and Medicaid provisions in the legislation that narrowly passed the House last month. Democrats have criticized the bill, saying it will take food assistance and health care benefits away from millions of Americans while cutting taxes for billionaires. But Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, who's a member of the Senate Finance Committee, says the bill is not a tax cut for the ultra wealthy.
The rates that have been in effect since 2017 are unchanged. There's no further tax cuts for anybody at any level of income in this particular legislation. We're just making certain that there's not the biggest tax increase in the history of the country.
The White House has asked Congress to pass the bill by the 4th of July, which is coming up quickly. If the Senate approves this revised version, it would have to pass the House again before this bill could go to the president's desk. Here at home, a political divide over land rights is deepening among Iowa Republican lawmakers. Tensions have been building for years as Summit Carbon Solutions tries to build an $8.9 billion carbon capture pipeline through Iowa and other states. A few months ago, the state legislature passed a bill that would have made that more difficult. House File 639 would have put new limits on eminent domain and added other requirements for companies working on pipeline projects. But Governor Kim Reynolds vetoed the bill the week before last. House lawmakers want to override her decision, but the Iowa Senate stands in the way.
Some Republican state lawmakers say they're not backing down from their fight to protect property rights.
We're not going to stop the battle, and we're not going to stop speaking truth on behalf of the people that elected us.
They're searching for a path forward after Governor Kim Reynolds vetoed House File 639 last week. The bill would have placed new limits on how companies can take private land to build pipeline projects and impose stricter permit and insurance requirements. In a letter explaining her veto, Reynolds said she supports protecting landowners, but warned the bill could hurt Iowa's economy. Now, House Republicans are calling for a special session to override Reynolds' decision, but that requires a two-thirds majority in both chambers, and Republican senators say they don't have the numbers.
I'm a realist. We don't have the votes. It's a waste of time to reconvene and have a special session.
Still, GOP lawmakers in both chambers say the fight isn't over, looking ahead to next year's session.
We're going to continue to introduce legislation, and we're not going to stop this fight because it's just that important.
Republican Senator Dave Rowley agrees the issue isn't going away and says the key may be rebuilding unity within the party.
Reconciling some of those differences and working together to go forward is our best hope for getting something constructive put together.
Right now, Senate Republicans remain divided on the issue of eminent domain, but Rowley, who supports additional restrictions, says that could change with time and effort.
The key to anything politically, in my opinion, is persuasion and to work with others and to try to expand that coalition, if you will, to bring more people on board.
After the governor vetoed the bill, Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver wrote in a statement that he expects the majority of his caucus, quote, would not be interested in any attempt to override her veto. House Republicans also tell me they're waiting on a lawsuit against the Iowa Utilities Commission, arguing that the IUC does not have the constitutional authority to grant eminent domain for a private economic development project. That ruling has not come down yet. Turning to 2026 now, a familiar face is jumping back into the race for Iowa's 1st congressional district. That covers southeast Iowa, including Davenport, Iowa City, and Keokuk. Democrat Christina Bohannon is running for a third time, hoping this is the year that she can flip the seat held by Republican Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks. And persistence may be the name of the game in this district. Miller Meeks herself won this seat on her fourth try for Congress. Now, if Bohannon and Miller Meeks both win their party's nomination, it would set up a third rematch for the two in 2026.
Democrat Christina Bohannon is hoping the third time's the charm.
People know me, people trust me. I have the experience to win this race.
In 2022, she lost to Republican Congresswoman Marionette Miller Meeks by more than 20,000 votes. Bohannon lost again in 2024, but by a much smaller margin.
In 2024, we came so incredibly close. We lost by just 799 votes out of 413,000. So, we think that's great momentum to build on.
Before a potential third rematch against Miller Meeks, Bohannon first will face Democrats Travis Terrell and Bob Kraus.
What makes you the best candidate to win the nomination and move to the general?
Experience, and the fact that I have been out there talking to people for the last 4 years.
There are more registered Republicans and independents than Democrats in Iowa's 1st congressional district. But political analysts with Sabato's Crystal Ball, the Cook Political Report, and Inside Elections say the race is a toss-up, meaning either party could win the seat in 2026. Bohannon points to her performance in 2024, saying her message resonates with voters across the political spectrum.
I think it's really telling that 33,000 people in this district who voted for Donald Trump also voted for me because they know that I will not be just another Washington, D.C. politician. They know that I'm going to be a strong and independent voice for the people of Iowa.
And Bohannon says her top priorities are lowering costs for Iowans and protecting access to health care. In a statement, Republican Party of Iowa Chairman Jeff Kaufman said in part, quote, "Whoever survives this messy Democrat primary will not stand a chance against Iowa champion Marionette Miller Meeks, who is laser focused on delivering real results Iowans can count on." Now, Miller Meeks is also facing a primary challenger, Republican David Pouch. Pouch also ran for the 1st district seat in 2024. Miller Meeks beat him, winning 56% of the vote. In District 2, which covers Northeast Iowa, Democrat Kevin Teachow is trying to unseat Republican incumbent Representative Ashley Hinson. And in Central Iowa, 2 state lawmakers are trying to flip Iowa's 3rd district seat. That's State Senator Sarah Trone Garriott and former House Minority Leader Jennifer Comfort, who are both vying for the Democratic nomination. Republican Congressman Zach Nunn currently represents Iowa's 3rd district. He is serving his 2nd term in Washington. There's still a lot of uncertainty around who will be on the ballot in the race for Iowa's 4th congressional district. That's the northwest corner of the state. Republican Iowa State Senator Lynn Evans says he is considering a run for the seat. GOP Congressman Randy Feenstra currently holds the seat, but Feenstra has launched an exploratory committee for governor. If he launches a campaign to lead Iowa instead of for Congress, that would create an open race for Iowa's 4th district. Democrat Ryan Melton suspended his campaign last week, announcing the decision on X. Melton said he made the decision after losing his job and also mentioned a health concern. Well, still to come on Close Up, the 2026 Senate race is heating up, why candidates are lining up for the chance to represent Iowans in Washington. And with so many candidates interested in this Senate race, why a primary could set them up for success heading into the general election. Welcome back to Close Up. Well, the 2026 race is so far away, but Democrats are lining up vying for a chance to flip Iowa's Senate seat that is currently held by Republican Senator Joni Ernst. Iowa State Senator Zach Wahls most recently entered the race. He joins Democrats J.D. Scholten and Nathan Sage, who are also running for the seat. State Representative Josh Turek, a Democrat from Council Bluffs, said back in March that he was considering a campaign. Turek has served 2 terms in the Iowa House and is also a 4-time member of the U.S. Summer Paralympic basketball team. Des Moines School Board Chair Jackie Norris says she's also, quote, seriously considering a run for U.S. Senate as a Democrat. She once served as chief of staff to Michelle Obama and worked on political campaigns for former Governor Tom Vilsack and former President Barack Obama. Republicans Jim Carlin and Joshua Smith say they're challenging incumbent Senator Ernst in the Republican primary. Although Ernst has not formally announced a 2026 re-election bid, she has hired a campaign manager. It is shaping up to be one of Iowa's most closely watched political battles, and not just because of who's running. Experts tracking the race say any candidate trying to unseat Senator Joni Ernst faces an uphill battle. I talked with our political analyst Dennis Goldford to break down what's at stake in this race.
The danger of a primary is that it might get nasty and it can chew up a lot of monetary and other such resources.
KCCI political analyst Dennis Goldford says competitive primaries can come with a cost, but also can help candidates sharpen their skills.
The primaries give candidates a chance to find and strengthen and hone a particular message. It also gives them a chance to test how well they're going to be able to raise money for the campaigns.
Goldford says that preparation may help a Democratic candidate facing an uphill battle in the general election.
For a Democrat to have a chance of being successful in Iowa, he or she's got to find a message that in some way moves people past that initial antagonism so many people in the state have toward Democrats.
Many of the Iowa Democrats in the Senate race launched campaigns after Republican Senator Joni Ernst went viral for her comments at a town hall and a follow-up video that some saw as dismissive.
It was her second comment that was seen as sarcastic and snarky by a lot of people around the country, not just in Iowa. That's the one that's gotten her into a bit of trouble at this point.
But Goldford says Iowa has shifted red in the last several elections, meaning Ernst still has an advantage if she runs for re-election.
Whatever difficulty Senator Ernst has gotten herself into, the voter registration statistics at this point at least give her a bit of a cushion.
I talked with Iowa State Senator Zach Wahls about why he wants to represent Iowans in Washington. The Democrat from Eastern Iowa has served in the state Senate since 2019, and now he's joining a growing field of candidates hoping to flip Joni Ernst's Senate seat in 2026.
I want to do something to help solve the problems that hardworking families are facing. I've got a track record from my time in the state legislature of standing up to leaders of both parties when they're not delivering for Iowans, and it's exactly what I'll do in the United States Senate.
What was the moment or the issue that made you decide that now is the right time to take on Joni Ernst?
My wife and I had a lot of conversations earlier this year about how can we best serve our constituents and neighbors. And when I saw Senator Ernst say that the Republican healthcare plan is to just wait for people to die from these Medicaid cuts, I knew that we had to do something.
How would your approach to representing Iowans differ from Senator Ernst's approach?
Well, we need a senator who's going to put Iowans first and who keeps their promises and stays in touch with the people. One of the things as I talk with Iowans that I just keep hearing about is how the economy isn't working for us. And my family and I see this in our own lives too, whether it's at the grocery store and the fact that prices still haven't come down, or when we drop our son off at daycare and we're reminded that we're paying almost as much for daycare as we are for our mortgage. Or I hear from constituents who are struggling to get their prescriptions filled.
If Senator Ernst runs for re-election, she is a seasoned incumbent who has strong name recognition in our state. What makes you confident that you would be able to beat her?
When Senator Ernst first ran in 2014, she made a promise to Iowans. She said that she would only serve 2 terms. 12 years later, I think it's crystal clear that Joni Ernst hasn't changed Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has changed Joni Ernst.
Can you make a pitch to Iowans on why you're the best person to represent them in Washington?
The last thing that I would say, Amanda, is this. I've been fighting for my family and families like mine for a long time. In the Iowa Senate, I fought hard for my constituents and my neighbors and to do the right thing, no matter who was in charge or who was calling the shots. My promise to you is that you're a U.S. Senator. I will never forget who I am. I will never forget where I come from. And I will fight for you every single day, exactly as hard as I fought for my own family.
After Senator Ernst's comments about Medicaid at her town hall and a social media video that she posted after went viral, a spokesperson for her office issued a statement writing, quote, "While Democrats fearmonger against strengthening the integrity of Medicaid, Senator Ernst is focused on improving the lives of all Iowans. There's only two certainties in life, death and taxes, and she's working to ease the burden of both by fighting to keep more of Iowa's hard-earned tax dollars in their own pockets and ensuring their benefits are protected from waste, fraud, and abuse." When we come back, we hear from Democrat and veteran Nathan Sage on his Senate campaign, plus Republican Jim Carlin's priorities in the race and why he says he's more equipped for 2026. Democrat Nathan Sage was the first person to launch a bid for Republican Joni Ernst's Senate seat back in April. The Mason City native serves as executive director of the Knoxville Chamber of Commerce and is an Army and Marine Corps veteran.
The one thing that I just don't understand is, you wouldn't, being a veteran like I am and Joni's a veteran, you wouldn't tell troops that are going out on a mission before they go out on a mission that hey, we're all going to die. You wouldn't say that. So why are you okay saying it to people that are potentially losing their Medicaid and worried about their life going forward? We have our representative who's supposed to be representing Iowans, supposed to be representing the people here, caring about them, trying to keep them safe, protecting them. Seemed like she did not care, and a lot of people are what it just continues to do is pile up this anger that's just been building and festering for a lot of Iowans, and I think that's what we've seen is just this progression in the anger, and I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
What would your message be to those Iowans who are frustrated by her response? How would you handle things differently if you were in her shoes?
I think when it comes to it, it's like, first of all, I wouldn't vote for a bill that gives tax breaks to billionaires. I don't think I would be okay with 86,000 people potentially losing their Medicaid. And so I think that role would be different. But at the same time, you know, you're there to listen. You're there to understand. You're there to empathize. I know that's a word that seems like it's lost these days, but that's what you need to do and understand what these people are going through. And so I think trying to understand what they're going through and how I can help them and how I can make their life better is the way I'd go about it. What I'm trying to do is say the things that need to be said to garner the attention that we're not going to keep doing this, and we're tired of we're tired of the status quo, and we want to have a better life. And I think it's important that we get the voters to come out, and they're out voicing their opinions, but we got to get them to vote. And the only way we're ever going to get anywhere or get where we have proper representation is to vote Joni out and vote candidates, working class candidates like myself, in that can actually represent those people. And at the end of the day, what I want to do is help, and that's why I'm here.
A former Iowa State Senator is also running for Ernst's seat. Republican Jim Carlin served in the state legislature from 2016 through 2023. He also previously ran for the U.S. Senate in 2022, but lost then to incumbent Chuck Grassley. Now Carlin says he's ready to run again.
Right now, when you had a year where there was 20% inflation, big deficit spending, and a national debt over 36 trillion. You have to look at the implications that's going to have down the road.
You mentioned you ran for the Senate back in 2022, then you lost to incumbent Senator Chuck Grassley. Why run again?
Because the reason why you ran hasn't changed. And, you know, it was hard, and you can certainly give up. But Senator Ernst, when I compare her to Senator Grassley, her voting record, for instance, most Republicans don't know, but her votes, 42% of the time, they're aligned with Republican platform.
What are the top 3 issues you'd like to accomplish if you were elected to the Senate?
Well, right now, I think our country is in a bit of a financial mess. I think DOGE was a good start. But right now, I think the way we spend money really needs to be tracked better. I also think we need some campaign finance reform. And the reason why is pretty plain. I think after having served for 6 years that in the State House, that the agenda is largely driven by a lot of corporate interests. And the super PACs allow billionaires to hide donations by funneling them through nonprofit corporations. So it's not traceable. Lastly, I agree 1,000% with President Trump on his America First agenda. We used to make stuff before World War II, and we've lost our manufacturing base in a lot of very serious sectors with national security implications. We do have to protect our borders, and we need to stop getting in these never-ending wars that cost our country and our people trillions of dollars.
What's your message to Iowans on why they should vote for you?
I think you should vote for me because I'm actually going to look after you. I think my record in the State House speaks to that. I obtained a senior property tax freeze. I wrote the bill for that. I got the Iowa Veterans Trust Fund reinvested to where it now earns 10 times as much money just by finding out it was getting an abysmal return. I exposed elder abuse in the Iowa Veterans Home. And I helped get the heartbeat bill passed.
Welcome back. Tensions in the Middle East are reaching new heights as long-standing hostility between Israel and Iran enters a dangerous new phase. Israel launched a major strike deep inside Iranian territory, triggering explosions in the capital city. The attack intensified conflict between the two nations. Israel said it targeted nuclear and military facilities, killing Iran's top military and nuclear scientists. Israel's attack comes as tensions have escalated rapidly over Iran's advancing nuclear program. I spoke to Ynon Cohen, the Consul General of Israel to the Midwest, who says Israel is working to deter an existential threat, one he says could trigger a more dangerous, broader war.
What's your message to Americans, to Iowans who are watching this on Israel's position and why this is something that they should be paying attention to?
Well, this is a great question. I have to say that first, Iowa has also always been a beacon of support for the U.S.-Israel partnership, and this is something that we appreciate a lot. And what we're doing right now is actually preventing a much more destructive war down the line, maybe in a couple of months, this time with potentially a nuclear-armed Iran. We're operating now to prevent a much more destructive war in the near future. Because over the past few months, what we've seen is the Iranians rushing into weaponizing their enriched uranium. In other words, to build their first nuclear bomb. According to our intel, that was a matter of a year, maybe less than that, a few months. This is why this operation was so imminent. You know, Iran has the most dangerous regime in the world, and we can just not allow the most dangerous regime in the world acquire the most dangerous weapons in the world. And this is why we're operating right now.
Meanwhile, Iran's health ministry says more than 200 people have been killed, many of them civilians, since Israel's attack began on June 13th. Have a great day.